Welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm Charlie Eisenhood. I'm the publisher. Joining me is Josh Mansfield. And I got a question for you, Josh. We've been in these weird, in-between times since, people started getting vaccinated and, things have been a little weird. I mean, I'm sure it's different everywhere. It might be a lot different for you in Idaho than it is here in New York City. But, when you walk into a restaurant in New York City, they're like, let me see your vaccination card. You can't sit down inside the restaurant unless you are vaccinated. So we have this weird vibe. So my question to you is, what have you done differently, if anything, since the pandemic? Now, I know it's still sort of going on, but a lot of people, I think, are starting to get back to going to concerts and doing things again. So have you made any changes in your routine or your life coming out of, the last 2 years?
Not a little bit. And I would say in the day-to-day life, I feel pretty close to pre-pandemic. And I wasn't until I got vaccinated. But once I got vaccinated, I started feeling a little bit more comfortable. Anytime though I feel any sort of, and even in Idaho, I mean, you were talking about getting vaccination cards checked. I got vaccinated and then I stuck my card in my filing cabinet with other documents because I haven't had to show it once. Wow. I had to go digging for it because I had a work conference coming up in Texas and they wanted it. But other than that, I haven't shown it to anybody yet. Some places require masks, other places don't. If they don't require masks, it's kind of 50-50 if I'll wear one. But if I feel even the slightest bit of sniffle, anything, I'm wearing a mask, washing my hands, I close my office door. I mean, I take any sort of signs of possible illness very, very seriously. Sure. And then I do with employees as well. So I'd say that's the biggest difference right now. And maybe I'm not being as prudent as I should, but it's weird in Idaho because I am one of the more prudent ones.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can't stand wearing a mask anymore. I hate every minute of it. When I'm on the subway, I'm just miserable. I'm looking forward to things being fully normalized. Mm-hmm. And I did just get back into the gym routine. I got knocked way off. And I've been somebody who likes going to the gym for a decade. And, the gyms were closed for a long time back in 2020. Right. And then they reopened in the fall and I started going. And then, the Delta kind of came through last winter and it was I don't know if I should be at the gym right now. Seems like not the smartest place to be. But now I'm back in a rhythm and it's just so great to have that regularity back. I feel like my whole schedule was bizarro for a long time because it was just spending a lot of time at home and I work from home anyway, so then I'm just constantly working. So I'm glad to have that back. And
agreed.
All right, well, we've got a great show. We are going to be joined by Brian Earhart, of course, commentator and coach and player. He's always got a lot of interesting things to say. And he was just, he does his own podcast. He was just interviewed on his own podcast, and it was a very interesting interview. I'd encourage you to go check that out over on the Flight Diary. And we'll be talking to him about his 2022, what's been going on with him. And so let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. Brian Earhart joining us here on the Upshot next. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Pound guarantees all of their packs against defects in materials and workmanship for the lifetime of every pack. That's right, lifetime warranty. That's the kind of commitment they have to making a great disc golf bag. Go to pounddiscgolf.com to learn more about their great options. Joining us now on the Upshot is touring pro and head of the Flight Diary podcast, commentator, coach, a little bit of everything, as he just said to me, Brian Earhart. Brian, welcome. How are you?
I'm great, man. I'm very busy, but that's a fantastic thing. So yeah, I'm doing really well.
So, before we kind of look to the future, which is, I'm sure, something that will be a theme of today's show, I just want to ask, how was your 2021 season? You kicked things off with the top 10 finish at Vegas, and then it was a little bumpier road from there, at least on the course. So, how was your year overall?
I mean, yeah, I guess looking at the tournament performances will only leave you with like a short-sighted vision of what my season looked like for me. Because for me, it was one of the most eye-opening, maybe liberating experiences of my life. Yeah, I mean, off-season going into this season, I trained really hard. I knew distance was becoming a prerequisite, so I trained distance really hard. I trained my putt really hard. I worked out a bunch. And yeah, I did great at Vegas, which felt like that was supposed to happen. But my whole plan going into this year was I wanted to see if I could play just a few less tournaments and make room for all of my projects and things that I'm good at and I'm getting known for in the world of disc golf, which was, the podcast that out of nowhere became something that I didn't expect. And that people really like. And then my commentary, which again, I started just on a whim in 2019 and people kept asking me to come back. So I wanted to see if I could make room for all of those things. Obviously, I was doing Gatekeeper's audio and commentary full time. Every big event that they were at, I was doing commentary. So I wanted to see what happens. And Vegas, obviously, that was fresh, first tournament of the year. Didn't really have the tour in full swing, and all that training paid off. For me, though, the moment the tour actually kicked in, like I had to start traveling and making arrangements and planning, it still felt like too much, and it felt like everything just crumbled down upon me. And the competing and everything that kind of encompasses competing was taking away from the media. And when I did too much media, I started feeling guilty about not putting enough into competition. It was just this game of tug of war, where theoretically I had tons of time for it. But it was the fact that I, at this point in my life, wanted to put all of my chips into a basket. And I couldn't do that. And it was just some mental gymnastics that I couldn't handle. And yeah, my tournament performances started really struggling. I started having some terrible performance anxiety on the course and started making a lot of like strange, foolish mistakes. I remember one round specifically at Jonesboro, I missed like 4 10-footers and still shot a 6 down. Like it was just a lot of strange things like that started happening to me. And I just, after a while, it was like my subconscious started showing its cards. My apathy towards competition just went away. Or no, it came back. Like I started just not caring at all. Like I would take a huge number, not care. I would take a, amazing birdie, not care. And there was no sense of urgency after a while. On the other hand, I was going to all these big tournaments and I was getting people like, hey, your podcast changed my life. Or, you are my favorite commentator in the entire world. And I was getting messages left and right from people because of what they had heard from me, wanting me to teach them more. There was like all these opportunities coming to me outside of the competition that started feeling like a chore, which sucks because my contract was a player contract. So there was this huge like psychological dissonance going on. And I started realizing like, I don't have to do this. I don't have to play anymore. Like I love disc golf, and right now it feels like I don't love disc golf, and that's not true. So yeah, this season was very strange, but I think I started to realize why I actually went on tour 4 years ago, and I'm at a point where I can finally make that step, and I feel like my voice has been heard enough times, and people can take it seriously enough for me to actually take a step into a different direction. So that's how my season went. It was crazy. and a lot of ups and a lot of downs and a lot of reflection. But I'm honestly happier than I've ever been in this moment in time. And I'm grateful that you guys even asked me to be on the show.
So typically pros will measure their success based in top 10 finishes and wins, cash earned, etc. What were your measures of success for this season then, if not on the course?
I took a step in the direction that felt more like me. And I no longer feel that horrible imposter syndrome that I had for the past 2 seasons. My contract was a player contract, but I was only known for the things that that I like doing, and I want my money to come from that. So honestly, the success was being honest with myself and digging deep into who I am and looking back on why I love disc golf in the first place. I mean, on the course, this year I was so apathetic on the course that I just I had some good moments on the course for sure. Playing well at Vegas felt good, but none of that has ever really mattered to me. I think success for me is measured in happiness, which can't really be measured. It can't really be quantified. So, and that's how I kind of knew that I needed to take this step, because again, on the Flight Diary, I just released an episode with myself as the guest. My best friend interviewed me, kind of telling my story. Interviewing people for the Flight Diary digs deep into their lives, and I'm finding that, I don't have that killer instinct, chip on my shoulder, blood in the water mentality that a lot of these top athletes have in this game. So, for me, the success was realizing kind of more who I am as an individual and where I need to take that professionally.
I've listened to the whole show that you recorded with yourself, I suppose. And I'll just plug it for our audience. You can even pause this and go listen to it and then come back to this, because I think it contextualizes a lot of what you're talking about so far. I'm curious to know if back when you decided that, you were going to try to go all in on disc golf, and, you talk about in that episode how you were at kind of a crossroads point where you had a good job, you had steady income, you could have gotten a nice apartment, you could have had a nice normal life, you could have played disc golf on weekends and after work and probably had a great time and probably even earned some money playing, local B and C tiers. And you decided, you mentioned that your dad said to you, no, this is what you want to do. You want to go out on tour. And you said, you know what, you're right. And you did it. Now that you're sitting here and you have this, window of opportunity for commentary and media and maybe coaching, which is something that we talked about a bunch, coaching that is, on our subscriber bonus segment yesterday. You sound like you're really happy about this, but is there any sense of disappointment that you couldn't make it as a professional player? Because I imagine that when you went on tour 4 years ago, that what was in your mind was being a professional player, right? And wanting that as the lifestyle. Maybe since that's changed, or maybe that's never what your motivation was. So I'm curious, how you saw it then versus how you see it now.
Great question. It's like my imposter syndrome is asking me questions right now. No, man, I think, again, the biggest realization was that anytime I started really grinding to be elite player, that's when I started feeling like this is not me. I'm putting a costume on. But going on tour is the only way to make a living at disc golf in the way that I knew how. So to me, that felt like I had to be a good player and I had to be sponsored and I had to do all these things in order for anyone to take me seriously in any way, shape, or form. So in the beginning, and again, this is why I talk about looking back on all of this and realizing I'm in a great spot. I wanted freedom when I went on tour. Paul Macbeth, when he was 17, said he wanted to transcend the game of disc golf and he wanted to be a pioneer, whatever. I never thought about that. I wanted to get out of my job. I wanted to be on my own terms, and I wanted to do the thing that I couldn't stop thinking about. Deep down, if someone were to ask me right away, we'll pay you to do commentary, I probably would have said yes right away. I never was thinking world champion. And I look back at this and I kind of laugh, because the moment my contract started getting upped as a player, the more I started feeling like the biggest phony on the planet. And it was almost like my subconscious, again, was showing its cards. Like, listen, man, like, don't get too deep into this, because, this is not necessarily why you got here. It's like once you have to start paying the bills as a player, things get different. Things definitely feel different. The lifestyle initially of being on my own time and, living out of my Buick, those were great times. Those were phenomenal times in my life. But the moment you have more expectations of you from companies and all this other stuff starts happening, it changes your role as a player and it makes you realize what you actually want. And that's where I'm at. So there's zero disappointment. I did exactly what I wanted to do. And if I kept trying to play, which I could, I said in the episode that if I dropped all the other side projects and I, dumped my girlfriend and I went solo into this, I would probably be a great player and get top 10s all the time. And I don't doubt that for a second, but I don't want that. That would be me putting a costume on. That wouldn't be like my everyday clothing. And when you look at someone like Kevin Jones, that is his everyday clothing. He wants to stomp people. That's like why he steps onto a disc golf course. And I want to share it with people. I've always kind of said that I feel more like a medic than a warrior. And I want to start kind of moving into that role in the world of disc golf.
So I've got two questions for you, and I understand if you're limited on your answers on either of them. My first one, maybe I'm reading into this a little too much, but you said a couple of times that your contract with Discraft was a player contract. Yeah. Have you renegotiated that for 2022 to look differently? And if so, can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to be essentially switching out the competition for coaching, which is my biggest passion in disc golf. I love teaching disc golf. I love talking disc golf. It goes much more alongside of the commentary and whatnot. In regards to branding, me and Discraft have not come to an agreement yet. They're interested in working out some sort of coaching contract, which has not really been done before. But we haven't gotten there yet. There's a lot of things in my life right now that are just completely up in the air. I have a lot of phone calls happening. The moment I kind of announced that I wasn't playing next year, I started getting a lot of phone calls. So I'm just trying to figure out who is the best, who are the best people to partner with and what my pillars of my career are going to look like moving forward. So nothing in stone yet, but I'm definitely wanting to work with them moving forward. I love Discraft.
And, sorry, Charlie, just want to do one quick follow-up question with that. So do you envision yourself then being an associated, almost like an ambassador, where you coach local level pros all the way down to high school age? Or are you looking to get a contract to be the coach of Discraft's team and their tour team and coaching pros?
So I mean, I like that idea. I've worked with numerous pros on the tour right now. Not going to name names because I won't take credit for them, but I love working with professionals because it's more performance coaching and less of technique coaching. And that's really interesting to me. And it seems like something that I've been pretty successful at. But yeah, in the beginning, in order to get my name out there, Discraft's not going to just go, oh yeah, ding, 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 you want to coach, so you get to coach now. I'm going to go out and do the thing that I did on tour when I was competing. I'm going to go out and I'm going to interact with the communities and continue to brand myself in a way that people, find a reason to trust me. And it's going to start out with amateur players and potentially, if I build a good reputation, I would love that kind of contract. I already have like a format already planned out. essentially you can be just an available resource on the road. And if players are going through a slump and need someone to structure field work for them and hold a camera up and, help them out, I think that's a great addition to any team. Because there's a lot of players that are struggling on the road, and a lot of times there's no resources for them to, for someone to pump them up and get them on the right track again. Because there's team captains, but team captains across the board are still players, and they're still, out for themselves, not in a bad way. But if there was someone who is like, hey, I saw you had a bad couple of tournaments, let's get together and let's figure this out. Let's get you started on the right track. Like that sounds so exciting to me. But I want to make sure it's an organic process. And I know that anything in disc golf starts with just taking a step. Again, I could try to take a step in one direction, and then that would start some other chain reaction that gives me a even bigger opportunity in another direction. So you guys know this. You can never quite predict like your 3-year plan in disc golf. So I'm just going to work hard and do all the things that I love and try to share that with people and see what happens from there.
So let's talk some specifics, at least what you can. What is the commentary plan for you in 2022? Obviously, you did gatekeeper stuff this whole past year. You're also on Disc Golf Network recently, I think for the first time. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so are you anticipating doing the thing about Disc Golf Network is that you're not on tour doing that, right? That's happening in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. That's happening in Bend. So what is your commentary plan? It's a little bit of a choice, I would think, between whether you want to be doing post-production or live stuff.
Yeah, great question. And again, the answer to that is that it's up in the air. It still is. And I honestly loved doing live commentary. I loved it. And I love having a team. I love having like a production team behind everything. I love being just a piece of the puzzle that feels really cool. But they have a lot of commentators already. So I don't know if there's a place for me. I think they really liked the work that I did, but so does Gatekeeper. So for me, it's going to come down to me making a pretty big choice. And what DGN would do if they said, hey, Brian, we have a pretty sizable amount of tournaments we want you to do. They fly you out. So if I tell them I'm going to be on the road, and I have to do this, I have to be on tour, they'll fly you out to go do the commentary. But if it got to a point for me where, again, at this point, I turned 30 this year and I don't want to be a world champion. I do want to buy a house one day though. So if someone offers me like a great deal and I can teach lessons locally and do that thing, that would be fantastic. But I still have a lot of negotiation to do with a lot of people. And it's actually kind of stressful because I love all these people that I've worked with. And it's the first time I'm having to set boundaries this firm.
Do you think that you could get players on tour to pay you for your coaching services? I don't know if they're paying you now or how that works.
I actually have a few that had mentioned that. I don't know if I'm going to take it right away, depending on like my partnership with Discraft or not. But yeah, I've had some players talk to me about that already. It would be super cool to one day have a player making the big money finally hire a swing coach for the first time, or like a performance coach for the first time, I would kill to do that, because then you just get to geek out and just study all the time. That would be amazing. But I don't know if I'm going to do that yet. There's so many options happening right now. And you guys caught me at a time where I'm still trying to like line up everything that I'm doing.
What are you most passionate about doing? Like if you could just make the career that you wanted, what would it be? Like, do you want to be a coach? Do you want to be a commentator? Like what's most exciting for you?
If money was no option, I would have a private facility in the woods near a disc golf hub with a training facility on it, a gym, pro shop, and I would have field trips come in. I would have children come in and give them like science demos, show them the physics of a Frisbee, teach them disc golf, teach lessons to the local players that come through, have touring players come in and teach in the off season as well. It has something to do with coaching for sure and teaching the game of disc golf. But I mean, that's such a moonshot for now. It has to start somewhere. But if I could just somehow mix the two things that I love most, which is teaching and disc golf, I'll get there at some point.
So the second question I wanted to ask, that if you don't want to answer, that's completely fine. I understand. A lot of pros in terms of their financial earnings have a combination of their contract with their Tour Series disc, which you obviously for 2021 had, and then tournament earnings. And I mean, that's the bulk of, and maybe perhaps like secondary sponsorships. That's the bulk of, I would say, a typical player's earning. What percentage, if you could just do a small percentage breakdown, what percentage came from your Discraft contract? What percentage came from your commentating? What percentage came from lessons? If you're comfortable sharing that.
I think, I mean, prize money this year, we're not even going to talk about because it was laughable. Yeah, it was just a really bad year for that, but trying to think. I mean, just in general, my sponsors paid me great. My partnership with Ledgestone went really well. I'm going to probably work with them again next year on a bigger scale. I would say Discraft took up about 60% of that. Something along the lines of that. I mean, obviously my name was on the zone, so it's a fantastic form of income, but that's why I have to get more serious about not doing favors for people anymore. And taking my value a bit more seriously. So yeah, that's the answer for you.
Well, this is a very interesting situation that you're in, because this is like the moment where disc golf is starting to transition into these options where people can actually make money in media, make money in coaching and teaching, and not just purely from being a top 10 player. You know, I've kind of been waiting to see who makes this choice. You know, Philo has made this choice at least a decent number of times lately, where he's choosing to commentate over competing when competing would be an option for him. And now you're like full on making this choice.
Yeah.
You know, is it scary? Like the fact is, there isn't really an established path for secure income in this world. You know, I mean, you just said it, 60% coming from your sponsorship contract with Discraft. Like, if that's going away, if you're not going to have your name on the zone, like that, all of a sudden you got to fill those gaps. So are you nervous about that, or does it more feel exciting than nerve-wracking?
I mean, I wish I could get people to feel how all-encompassing being a competitor is. And maybe not for other people, but for me, it was this terrible burden over my head all season long. Every move that I made, I thought about how it was going to affect me in the tournament. And I hated it. I hated the feeling after a while. And that's why I'm doing this, because I realized, oh, with that burden gone, all of the obsession that I put into, all this wasted obsession that gets put into all these little tiny things can be put into something meaningful. And I mean, it's not scary at all. It's like, to me, it feels like a light bulb went off, and this is what I want to do. So there's no failure. Like, I have plenty of money. Like, I'm not living in poverty. I'll just say that. And already this off season, you know, I'm doing video lessons and I up my prices because I know that what I provide is worth something. It's actually worth a decent amount, and my calendar's filling up very fast. You know, I'm not afraid of losing on money. It's easy to provide value and have someone give you value back in this world. And there's never been a blueprint in disc golf, even if you are a player, you know, so that's not new to me. But again, I can always go back and use my college degree and get a job, but that's not why I went on tour. So, It's exciting to start from scratch. I love the idea of just like creating a new character that feels more authentic to myself.
Do you feel like there are a number of other players on tour who maybe share some of the burden that you were talking about when it comes to competition? Obviously, this isn't going to apply to the people who are winning on a regular basis and are earning, tens of thousands of dollars from tournament winnings, plus maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars more from their sponsors. But there's a big middle class in disc golf, and they're not cashing at every tournament. Do you hear from other pros that they feel this weight?
Well, not in the same way that I've found. And I'm not saying that I'm some special little unicorn, but the thing that I've noticed in the people that get burnt out, that are like, oh, I hate this game, I'm going to quit. They're still wildly competitive. They cannot get away from this game. Philo's the same way. That's the reason he hasn't gone into all the stuff that he's good at full time, because he can't stop competing. That's like part of his reality. So I've met players that are really burnt out, but I haven't met that many players that are like, I'm done with this. I just can't compete anymore. Most of the people out on the road, that's who they are. They are competitors, and their stream of consciousness is all revolved around competition. And mine is not. So I actually don't. That's the question that I've gotten most often when I've tried to tell people this, is like, oh, so you just got burnt out. You'll get back to it like 6 months. Just take the off season off. And I'm just trying to like, guys, I'm like, please believe me. Like, I don't have this chip on my shoulder that Adam Hammes has. Like, that X factor of like, I'm going to will myself to victory. I just don't have that in this game. I love throwing a disc more than anything in the entire world, but I haven't met that many players that share the same sentiment. Most of the people that share the same sentiment are not professional athletes. So I kind of like blinked and I opened my eyes and I was in this role driving the Discraft bus with Yuli, and I was like, oh boy, stuff got real quick.
So we told our subscribers on Discord that we were going to be interviewing you, and opened up to some questions from them. And a couple of them asked about your philosophy on coaching and where you think you can take coaching. Because it's not just a question, as well as, accessibility, right? The sheer number of coaches is lacking, obviously. So anytime the world gets a new disc golf coach, it is better for it. But in terms of your actual coaching style, what do you think helps you take disc golf to the next level for players?
Yeah. So, well, again, I think about coaching like podcasting. Like, say all three of us did the Flight Diary or that format of podcast, long form interview. Even if we asked very similar questions, the conversations would still go differently. And that's what I think with coaching. It's like, I feel like what I bring to the table are some pretty strong communication skills. And I don't care how my new thing in coaching is, I don't care how technically knowledgeable I am. If I cannot get the person I'm teaching to feel what I'm trying to get them to feel right away, I've failed. So I'm trying to get players back to a blank slate when it comes to body positioning. I have some pretty good ways of creating imagery that people can feel the correct body position right away. I relate it to some very elementary movements that they learned when they were younger. But yeah, I call it blank slate teaching. I try to remove things from someone's throw instead of add things and tell them that they need to change their grip or they need to change their heel to toe pivot, ratio, or their toe drag. Like, I don't care about that. In one lesson, if somebody, takes a lesson with me, I'm going to show you exactly why you're losing distance and spin. I'm going to show you that a lot of the disc golf throw when it comes to rounding, which is 99% of the issue we have to correct when people come for a lesson, it's all overcompensation. One thing is off, so then the body has to compensate in order to keep the disc on the line. So I will point out the compensations and start from the root of the cause, whether it's the footwork or the elbow position or whatever. But I like to provide big picture knowledge for people of how we can get to that blank slate. And then eventually, once you get good enough at disc golf, you can start to break the rules of form. You know, we don't talk about body English that much in disc golf, but Matty O bringing the disc up to his head, that's not, you don't teach that, but he's so good with his body position that he can cheat a little bit to make the disc fly a little differently. There's a lot of players on tour that do that. So I say, bring the beginner player back to a comfortable body position. And if they get good and they put the time in, eventually their own style is going to come out. So that's what I believe in.
All right. Can you give 2 to 3 tips for the average player? I mean, I don't know what average means. Let's say 900 rated. Somebody who knows a little bit about what's going on, understands kind of the basics of form and different disc shapes and weight stuff, but, you know, is struggling to get past 350 feet of distance. What are a couple of tips that you would give besides coaching services?
Well, I guess I'll drop one of the things that I'm noticing. This is something that I'm really working through right now as a teacher. And I've boiled it down to this. Most players that can't get past the 350 point, either they swing their plant foot even with their back foot when they throw, which creates an overcompensation at the last second, which creates rounding. Or a big thing that I'm trying to get players to feel right now is that lever of the forearm opening up on the line that they want to throw on. Most players either are attacking the disc at a downward angle, or even if they have decent height on their extension, their elbow pulls into their side. So they don't get the motion of their forearm opening up. So get your elbow off your side. If you want to create hyzer, tilt your spine over. Don't just dip your arm. And it's torso rotation. You're not falling into the shot. So it's footwork and it's the elbow positioning are two things that I'm finding are 99% of the people that I've worked with. It's one of those two things.
Now that you've delivered the hook, where can people go if they want to get coaching from you for our listeners?
Yeah. So I'm so happy that I'm getting back to this app. It's one that I used when I was working in the tech industry. It's called Calendly, and you guys might have heard of it already. You can create different types of events and people can book into your calendar. So people can go to calendly.com/Bearheart Coaching. You can also go to my Instagram. The link to the booking page is in the bio of my Instagram, Brian_Earhart. I have 2 different types of lessons. One of them is a backhand lesson that you just drop off your videos. And then essentially what you're booking is my due date of when I get you the response back. And you can also do a forehand and backhand, which is a little bit more money. I'm about to book in a live Zoom call where we just walk through the videos together on a live call. But yeah, right now everything's digital, but that's where they can go.
So when you're coaching a professional player, and I know you declined to mention some folks earlier, but I think it's at least decently well known that you've been working with Haley King a decent amount. What are you talking about with them? I mean, you're not talking about the plant foot with them mostly, I would imagine. Are you just there to be kind of like a support mechanism, or are you actually working on technical elements of their game in some sense, or talking about, hey, like when you get frustrated, you do this thing that's causing you to have bad outcomes with your shots?
With Haley, I mean, and at this point, I think Haley she's at a point now where she wants to start running with it herself, which is, I think, fantastic. Early on this season, Haley was coming to me with some performance questions. And the thing that I found with Haley that I loved was helping her see her skill set, her full skill set. 'Cause she is an absolute next level generation defining athlete. Her coordination is insane. Her ability to learn new skills is insane. But for her, it was because she's so good at all these different things. She made some of the worst decisions on the course ever. Either she would pull out a putter on like a 375-foot throw that she wouldn't be able to reach, or she would just not make very good decisions on the course. But then also I think a big thing that we worked on was the hyzer flip and her kind of working through those angles, because most of her shots were anhyzer to flat. That was her comfortable zone. But at Worlds, you know, with the elevation, she was struggling. She was trying to throw the Zeus on all these different lines, and it was just too stable. And I was like, take this heat out and throw it like a beat up Buzz. And let's see how that works. And she piped like a 430-foot rope, you know, and she was like, oh, okay, interesting. And, you know, for her, it's more like, I'm not here just like blowing a whistle, like, you're not doing this right. It's more like, have you thought about trying it like this? And I like the idea of creating imagery like, hey, you're good at throwing a flippy Buzz. Take this heat and throw it like that. You know, what would it fly like if you did that? And then letting them run with it, because the athletes have the coordination and the drive and obsession to be able to take that information and go, okay, I will do with that, you know, what I want. So that's been more my partnership with Haley, but at this point, she has everything, and I'm kind of excited for her to move into this next realm of self-discovery, because she impresses me from a physical standpoint, and I think once she gets past her late teens and early 20s, if she can survive those confusing years of life, I think she'll be absolutely phenomenal.
Well, Brian, this has just been fantastic. Last question from us here. You know, as you try to navigate these next couple months and figure out what your plan's going to be, I mean, so I have two quick questions. One is, are there any tournaments that, you know, I have to play that tournament because I love it, I love the course or whatever, and even if I'm not, you know, quote unquote on tour as a professional player, I'm going to play that event?
Mm-hmm. No, I don't like playing for score. I just don't want to play. I'll probably play that course. Like, I'll definitely play the courses everywhere I go, because I still want to train, because if I don't train and continue to grind my own form, I'm not going to be an effective teacher. So I'll play all these courses, but I just don't like, I'm trying to like get it through like people's heads. Like, there's nothing I want to do less than play disc golf for score anymore. It I don't know. So no, there's maybe one day, like, I might catch the bug. And if I ever move down to like Charlotte, which has beautiful golf, like, you know, maybe this time away from the game will like revitalize my desire to do it. But I'll never play tour events again, probably. You know, B tiers in the woods in North Carolina sound amazing, but I'm just not interested. I'm just not interested in playing for score right now.
Got it. So what's your plan for the off season, and are you expecting to be out there for the start of the tour in Las Vegas?
As of right now, I am, unless, you know, some insane opportunity comes my way. I'm planning on being in Vegas. And yeah, I'm going to Billings, Montana for the off season. My partner, who has been chasing me around for the past 2 years, has family in Billings, and I finally feel like I'm in a place where I can go support her and be around her and her family. And I'm really excited to go be the support system, whereas she was the support system throughout these past couple stressful years. And I'm just going to be grinding away at these video lessons and trying to better myself as a teacher. And still going to be doing some podcasts. I have a couple loaded up in the chamber. Sarah Hokum's episode should be coming out on my podcast in the next week or so. Yeah, it's all going to be just digital stuff for me. Just trying to get all my ducks in a row. And I have to do, you know, like an LLC now, and I have to do all these like little business things that you don't do when you're just living out of your Buick, you know? So, but man, I'm so excited. And I used to just hate snow so much, but now I feel like I'm in such a good place in my life that, you know, bring it on. I don't even care.
Ski season is here, Brian. I mean,
I've never been.
Oh, that's the thing.
You'll enjoy it.
I can understand why disc golfers wouldn't choose to do it. It's like a really good way to mess up your shoulder when you crash. But I'm telling you, you want to embrace the snow life. That's the way to do it.
Okay.
She's a skier. She used to ski race, skiing out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She used to ski race.
Yeah,
nice.
she used to ski race, and she wants to take me to Red Lodge. And have me, break my face a couple times. So we'll see how that goes. But
honest to God, you could learn a lot about coaching from how a really good beginner ski instructor teaches you how to ski.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so, anyway, a little plug for skiing. I'm obviously super excited. All right, Brian. Well, thanks very much, and excited to see what you do this coming year. And again, you can find the Flight Diary podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and I certainly encourage everybody to check it out if you're hearing about the life of professional disc golfers in a deeper way than you're ever going to get from 7-minute interviews in press conferences before tournaments.
That's right.
Brian, thanks very much.
Yeah, you guys are amazing. I'm really grateful you guys had me on.
Appreciate it. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Upshot. Well, great to talk with Brian. A very interesting and forthright speaker. I think he just jumped right in off the top. It's a real contrast to some pros. Sometimes you ask a professional,
most pros,
how are things going for you? Good. And you're like, all right, next question, baby. And Brian was like, well, let me tell you. But I think this is an exciting moment, certainly for Brian, it seems like, but also just in general for the sport, like people making the choice or even having the choice, period, to pursue things that are not competing while still being out on tour, So that I think is very interesting. What struck you about what Brian had to say?
I mean, that exact point, because when you look at commentating of post-production in the past, and we even mentioned this with Brian a little bit, it's done in a van on tour by the professionals who oftentimes played that round. They get off the course and then they walk over to the tent or the van and then they go do their commentary. Big Germ and Yuli talk all the time about, and especially when Sexton was on there, I mean, they would talk all the time about, oh yeah, well, I played this round, and they're commentating their own round as they're simultaneously playing and competing in these tournaments. And so it's different then to see, and we've seen it a little bit in terms of like Philo, for example, who'd been making the decision to pursue commentating. But I like this avenue that's being opened up for Brian, and I really hope that he gets kind of that coaching gig for pros, because I think we've been talking about the inevitability of it, and here's our first player who wants to pursue it and isn't 15, 20 years removed from the game in order to do so.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very interesting personality, and I think seems well suited to what he wants to do. Brian's he's done a little writing for Ulti World Disc Golf in the past. I think he talks about it in his podcast. He's an excellent communicator, and it's true. Like, he's a very good writer. He's able to talk about these things at a high level in a really cogent way. And it doesn't surprise me that he's a good coach. And it seems like almost like it's his calling, like some people are destined to be, maybe they're a good athlete, but they're a great coach. And I think that describes him. He's only 1,003 rated right now. Not to say that he couldn't be, as he talked about, a better player, finish higher if it was his sole motivation and focus week in and week out. But even then, is he going to be winning titles? Probably not. Some people are good, but not great. And I think that probably describes him. But that doesn't mean that you can't be a great coach. So,
well, I know when he said that he's going to be in Billings, Montana for the winter, I was like, I could use a lesson. My in-laws live in Helena, not too far away. So
people in the Discord who heard the subscriber bonus yesterday were saying, hey, by the way, if anybody knows of people in Philly who could coach me, I want to coach. And other people were like, yeah, let me know too. I think there's really unmet demand for this. The problem is it's who are those coaches going to be? You need people who understand and know the game, even if they're not elite, 1,000 rated. People overvalue being 1,000 rated as some sort of mark of your capacity to teach. That has nothing to do with it, right? I think I could teach disc golf better than I can play it already. It's just that's my nature. Like I'm a pretty good athlete, but like I'm never going to be a great disc golfer. But I feel like I understand the concepts required to help other people get better who do have more capacity to be really good players. I guess I'm sort of like putting myself. I'm not trying to coach you in Philly, but
for people looking for a coach in New York, guys, we got one. Here we go.
My point is more that I think there's a lot of people out there who may be really well suited to coaching disc golf who aren't necessarily great players themselves. And I think we're going to start seeing people try to fill those roles. I think there's real opportunity there. So let's go inside the circle. Josh, take it away.
Yeah, a couple of exciting pieces of news. The first of which, this is something that came out on Tuesday after we'd already recorded the show, but Eric Oakley has announced that he will be leaving Dynamic Discs. It's one of those moves that feels odd because he's the face, one of the faces of Dynamic Discs. He's on their tutorial videos and their forum videos, and the felon is synonymous with Eric Oakley, and he even mentions that in his video. So if you go to his Instagram, you can see this in his bio. But Eric Oakley has not announced where he'll be going next. But he will be leaving Dynamic Discs, which I believe was a year early on his contract.
Yeah, he left early. It was a mutual decision. Everyone's saying all the nice things. I don't know, man. Like these things tend to cause a little friction. I mean, we remember what happened when Paige Pierce left DD. And it's worth noting that like as soon as Eric announced that he was leaving, he was instantly scratched from the Dynamic Discs team page on their website. I think DD it's well documented and obvious to anybody who's paying attention, like had a hard time finding top level, particularly MPO players to rep their brand. And presumably that's at least in part due to not offering up big enough contracts. But I think they made a real push in 2020, missed out on a couple of people, which meant that because they'd pursued them, they didn't end up getting some of the second and third tier people that they might have had a chance to get. And so now you're just like a sailboat, rudderless in the water right now. And I think that they're going to make some acquisitions this offseason. I mean, they basically have to. On the other hand, like, is losing Eric Oakley like a death knell for DD? No. DD's whole strategy has clearly never been focused around intense player marketing. And I also think that Eric Oakley, while popular, did not play very well in 2021. And so, we'll see. I think this is like it's a weird breakup. You're right. It's weird because
it's
Oakley
weird.
was like the guy, right? He's like the captain of the team. And where is he going? Like, this is a bad time. Like, you didn't come off a contract year where you just rocked out. Like, you had a bad season. Who's going to pick you up? Like, I don't think you're coming out of this and getting a fat contract with somebody. Like, I've already heard speculation that he's going to go mixed bag. Wouldn't shock me. And for DD, it's like, this just drives home the fact that they are really needing to just pony up, back up the truck and dump a bunch of money on somebody. The problem is, who are you going to dump it on? There's nobody who's really attractive as a free agent candidate this year that would make sense. They may honestly just have to kick the can another year and try to load up on somebody in 2022, end of 2022 season, when I think there are going to be some big names up for new contracts.
Yeah, I mean, and on the FPO side, they do have Macy Valadiaz, correct? She's on Dynamic Discs. She's looking really great, and so I think that's something that has to be exciting for them and for their front office. But you're right. I mean, I don't think that not having a star MPO player this year would be the end of the world, right? Like you talked about, there isn't really one coming up available this year. So I don't think kicking it for another year is like the end of Dynamic Discs or the end of their pro team. But if they wait till 2022, they have to get one. Like have to, without a doubt.
I'll just go back to something that I'd like to talk about. And it's in an article that I wrote about Discraft transforming its brand. Go check it out. Discraft, when everybody left to go to Prodigy back, about 10 years ago, their team was decimated. They had like nobody. And everybody said on the forums, Discraft is dead. This is the end. Da-da-da-da-da. You know what they told me? Their sales in the year after they got absolutely just crushed in terms of pros on their team, their sales went up the next year. Okay? There is way too much stock placed in the PR side of who's where and whose team is good and whose team is bad. Obviously, it can have a real impact. There's a reason the companies do it. MVP obviously has benefited greatly from signing James Conrad and having James Conrad do miracle things for them to sell miracle amounts of discs for them. So it's not like there's not value there, but DD focusing a lot on youth and new players and local marketing at tournaments, they're going to be fine. Like they just opened a gigantic new factory that's 4 times the size of their old one, and they want to go from 75 full-time staff to 100 by the end of next year. Okay, so like everybody pump the brakes on like DD is dead. This is like the most ridiculously overhyped narrative in disc golf. That somehow, if you don't have the pros throwing your discs, like no one's going to throw your discs. It's just not true. Now, I do think optically it sucks, and I'm sure it's frustrating for the company. And I think that they could be doing better if they had a big name pro that was driving sales of, specific versions of their discs. But they're not hurting. Sorry. Like the whole industry has been just absolutely lifted to new highs over the last 2 years. It's not like this is somehow keeping them from being able to sell discs.
Without a doubt. I think that the market dynamic will be changing over the next 5 years because the way that people have been introduced to the sport just with the pandemic, I think more people are watching it now, watching it on YouTube. And so people are getting exposure to the brands that are being thrown, especially when there are commentators or post-production that list the discs that are being thrown. And so I think that that's getting more publicity for those brands. I agree. I think that Dynamic Discs could very much focus entirely on getting their products into Dick's Sporting Goods and into Sportsman's Warehouse and into, that's where they do. And that's when you go to Sportsman's in Pocatello, it's Dynamic Discs and a little bit of Innova. And so I think it's an excellent marketing tool and strategy and sales tactic. I think if Dynamic Disc wants to continue to stay relevant in the pro scene, they need to pick up an MPO player next year.
Yeah, it's fair. And look, everybody knows they want to get Calvin Heimberg. They tried to get Calvin Heimberg. Calvin Heimberg didn't want to leave Innova yet, and he is just a ripe target for changing brands next year. He's blocked by Ricky at Innova. He's expressed interest in Dynamic, and they're going to back up the truck for Calvin Heimberg. And I expect, he's clearly that's the most likely scenario is that he ends up at Dynamic, and it would be a very good fit for everybody involved, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
I agree. Next up on Inside the Circle, Myrtle Beach Open happened last weekend. Where was that at? Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, obviously. It was an A tier that Chris Dickerson and Katrina Allen both won in a playoff. So MPO and FPO goes to playoff. I know there's post-produced coverage. I saw some YouTube notifications on it. I don't remember which companies it were, but looks like it was an exciting tournament. So go check it out. Pretty loaded field, I would say, for the off season. A lot of people still on the grind.
This is one that has become like a pretty consistent tour, non-tour stop, postseason stop.
Sure.
It's easy to imagine this tournament becoming like part of the wraparound season in the future. Now, the interesting thing about this, right, this is run by US Disc Golf, which is the company that runs USDGC, which is sort of not Innova, but it kind of is Innova. And so they've been putting a lot of resources into this tournament. Chad Sullivan, who runs the show there, has, they've pushed this tournament now to be like a pretty serious stop with a lot of top pros competing. Myrtle Beach is also just awesome. Go play some crazy mini golf and have some seafood, and it's probably beautiful there this time of year. So no surprise to see lots of big names and some big names at the top. And, I think this is a tournament that is very interesting and like could be a part of the Elite Series in the future.
Final point on Inside the Circle. Infinite Discs will be hosting the first ever Disc Golf Con, Disc Golf Convention they're calling it. This will be February 15th through the 19th of next year in Las Vegas. And it's got everything from a gear swap to tournaments and C tiers to forums with the pros to VIP signings. It's a big deal. They're really promoting this thing. Tickets are $130. And if you want to play in the tournaments that they've got going on every day, some are singles, some are doubles. You have to pony up for those tournaments as well. It looks like a pretty exciting event, but Charlie, let me ask you this. Would you pay $130 to go to this event?
Conference in Vegas? I don't need a lot of excuses to go to Vegas. Look, I've been to some conferences. It's interesting this costs money. So I go to a big conference every year, although it's been a few years now because of the pandemic, but NAB, which is also in Vegas. It's a giant broadcasting conference. It's like latest and greatest in cinema, broadcast television, live streaming, audio production. Like anybody who's involved in like that AV world, it's incredible. It's mostly for people who are doing things way beyond what I'm capable of, and like they have cameras that are worth more than my entire live streaming production suite. But it's really cool, and it's free for attendees. Technically it costs money, but it's like the easiest thing in the world to get a code to get it in for free, because they want to have people there to come and see all these products. Now, this is like sort of like this in-between land. You can pay to go and hang out with the pros, but if you want to play in the C tiers, you got to pay extra. If you want to do the coaching, you got to pay extra. There's a lot of add-on costs. I think this is a great idea. I think a convention for disc golf has been overdue, and here it is now. They have big prize money available, and so a lot of pros have agreed to go, and there's panels, and I think it's going to be a cool thing. If this fit into my travel schedule in some way where it would make sense for me to make a stop along the way, yeah, I might consider going. But I would try to get in as a panelist, obviously.
Of course.
I want a free ticket.
I agree. I think, like you said, it's been long overdue. And I think that it's a good time for it to happen, that people are looking for those events post-pandemic to try and get into, to be a part of. We're still riding the pandemic surge in disc golf. And so I'm really interested to see if we can get, attendee numbers and at the different clinics, and just I want to see how well this is attended. Unfortunately, I'll be passing through Vegas a couple months early. But speaking of, I need recommendations. Las Vegas, which course should I play? And LA area, I need some courses. All right, hit
up Josh, Upshot at ultiworld.com. Let him know where should he go. I cannot help you on the disc golf questions, but if you have questions about where to go and play craps, I can help you out. That's probably not going to be relevant for you, but just in case.
All right, I appreciate it. I saw there's a course that overlooks Dodger Stadium, and I was like, I don't know if I'd be able to keep myself from vomiting while I play disc golf if I was looking at Dodger Stadium the entire time. So, I'm torn.
Just physically being near it makes me nauseous. All right, well, let us know, LA and Vegas, where to play some good disc golf. All right, well, that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, sign up as a subscriber, get our subscriber bonus. We talk a lot about coaching in disc golf, and it's a really nice pairing with the interview that we did with Brian today. So let us know, who do you want to hear from on the show soon? we're going to be doing lots of off-season interviews, and we've got plans for our roundtables. We're going to start lining up guests, and then we're going to have our roundtable shows in December, as always. Looking forward to that. And, we got our Thanksgiving episode coming up. Lots of fun stuff. Disc Golf Never Sleeps. We'll be back with you next week on Tuesday. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Josh, I'm Charlie saying so long.